Hi, I know I haven't made a video in quite a while. I have been kind of busy with my life and with my, mental health, stuff like that. But, to kind of like reintroduce myself, my name is Cruz. I'm 21. My gender is proxphere. My pronouns are they, them, and I live in Texas. But, this week we're talking about consent. And I know this topic is like pretty heavily touched on in um, a lot of different online communities, whether it be feminism community, trans community, non-binary community, even especially like sex ed communities, stuff like that. But I want to talk about something that I haven't really heard talked about as much, which is like emotional consent and things that go along with being rejected. Because I know that the typical way we think of consent is, when it comes to just sex, and we're people have really extensively covered like, saying no, understanding, nonverbal cues, things like that. But something that kind of took me a while to understand, and I think that people still really don't talk about as much, is like emotional consent, and that's it's kind of like uh, the other side to the same coin, and I mean in the sense that in emotional relationships, sexual relationships, romantic relationships, any kind of relationship you have with the person, there's going to be, you have to consistently give your consent. And I think there are times when we get rejected, we kind of struggle with, we kind of, like, our ideas of consent and respect for boundaries kind of go out the window. This is, examples of this include like when someone doesn't want to talk to you, and you keep sending them messages, when someone says, I just don't want to be with you, and you continue to, try to convince them that, it would be good to, if we were together, I really think that we should try again, blah, 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 things like that. And it's hard, I think it's hard for people to understand because, consent, like I said, it's talked about so much, like, we understand it when it comes to terms of like heterosexual relationships pretty well, because that's what's been talked about pretty extensively, like men and women, and when it comes to like actual penetrative sex. But one thing that kind of brought this to my attention was, even for me, like as someone, I'm a person, a non-binary person of color, in like trying to navigate like relationships with like cis straight men, and like I'm used to like trying to not find myself in the victim role, like I always have to say, I'm always very aware of whether or not someone is respecting my consent, or whether or not I say no. And there was this one time where I had stopped respecting someone's boundary when they'd given it to me, and when I realized that I was doing this and I was pushing them, it was with a boy, with a cishet boy, and he was, I had been sending him, he had been asking me for pictures, so I was sending him a bunch of pictures, and then I was like, oh, can I get one? And he said no, that he was shy, and I was like, oh, I promise, like, it's not a big deal, and I kept kind of pushing him, and then I realized, like, this is me, like, not respecting someone's boundaries, and I really need to stop. So I told him, I was like, you know what, I'm really sorry, like, that was super, super, like, gross of me to like push you. And I was like, if you don't want to send me pictures, that's totally fine. Like, I'm gonna take your no, and I'm not gonna push you anymore. And I think that event alone kind of like triggered my eyes being open to a bunch of ways that like we treat men in that kind of way. Like when they say no, we don't really respect their no's, because we kind of see, straight cishet men as like men who are always, they always want sex, they always want sexual attention, they always want validation, things like that, and they don't always want that. So for me, I've had to kind of like, and it's hard when you have like, when you bring mental illness into play, and you bring like emotional like baggage and things like that into play or into consideration. Like, when you get rejected by someone and you want to say, like, especially if you're still really into them, you want to say things like, please, like, give me another chance. But you really have to respect, like, they're telling you no. So you have to take that no. So like, just trying to, it's always very interesting to kind of take a concept that you thought only applied to one area, the sex area, but it actually applies to like the entire way that you interact with people. And this is true even for like friendships, things like that. Because I feel like we're using consent as we're using it as like a really like an umbrella term when it comes to sex, but we also should be using it like more commonly in the way that the way that we interact with other people, whether or not we're gonna have sex with them. Like just respecting your friend if they say, I don't really like that word that you say. Sometimes can you just not say it when you're around me, and then just saying, what, okay, I respect your boundary, you stated it, I'm gonna go ahead and, like, I'm not gonna, especially if it's something that makes them uncomfortable, you're not gonna try to, like, you shouldn't be like a jerk and just say, well, this is just me, blah, 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 because that's kind of abusive. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like other situations. I don't know, like there's, at my work, there's like a very lax feeling when it comes to the coworkers and how we talk to each other. And there's this one guy who works there who is very relaxed, and he doesn't really like, it's not that he doesn't respect boundaries, it's just that he doesn't assume that anyone has any. Like, you gotta have to tell him that you have some. When I started working there, he was calling me like baby girl and things like that. And forget that it invalidates my gender. It's like, it's gross. Like, I don't know you like that, and I don't really want. And it was kind of like an everyday thing, like, hey baby girl, can you get these files? You know what I mean? And it was like, he wasn't actively trying to like have sex with me or anything like that. It's just that he was saying things I didn't like. So I was like, you know what, hey, like, I really didn't give you permission to talk to me like that. You need to stop. He did. Thank God. But like, that's kind of another example of how consent kind of goes. Like, it's kind of like an ongoing thing with all these new people that you meet, and you have to remember what your friends' boundaries are, what your coworkers' boundaries are, what your partner's boundaries are, things like that. But I think especially people don't really pay attention to the emotional boundaries, like I said before about about being rejected. It's very, because I've been on both sides of that. I've been the person to be like, you know what, please give me another chance, and I've been the person to hear that. And it's not fun being on either side, but I think we stop a lot of like progress when we're just spouting out our wants and not really listening to the other person. And respect should come first, not like, well, I would like to be with you. It's like, okay, that's cool, but you gotta respect the other person's right to be like, I don't want to be with you. So that's it. But that is my little video on consent. I hope it was helpful. I know that like I haven't seen really anybody talk about consent in the way that I just talked about right now. But yeah, I hope that someone learns something, and I hope it helps them be a better person. Okay.